The material appearing in this presentation is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as advice of any kind, including without limitation, legal, accounting, or investment advice. Now, with no further ado, I'm pleased to introduce your moderator for this webcast, Frank Kaufman with Moss Adams. Frank, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deanna, and welcome everybody. It looks like we have about 100 C-suite executives joining us today, so we're very excited to be doing the fourth version of 6, hopefully entertaining and informational sessions with you. I'd like to just kind of mention a couple things as Deanna showed you the controls. What we're really hoping for here is participation. I think you will get the most out of it if you ask your questions. So in the chat room, please populate questions as you go. We'll keep an eye on those and we will make sure that we get to them. And in fact, if we have to cut out our sort of standard presentation to address yours, we will do so. So please participate there. As far as the panelists that we have today, I'm very excited. I'm trying to use the right term. I will say a divergent group of specialties. So I will introduce each by name and company, and they will go through and tell you a little bit about who they are and what they do. So first off, Bill Rusitzky from the Newport Group. Bill, I think you're muted.
Don't worry about that. This is Bill Rusitzky from Newport Group. I'm here to make sure my fellow panelists unmute before they talk. At Newport, we help companies with transitioning their business and helping them grow. All of us are sort of senior executives from previous experiences. I personally ran Adobe's business development and partnership effort, as well as a number of large technology companies, including Chief Revenue Officer of THX. Thanks, Frank.
Great, Bill, thanks. Ashley Crowder, please tell us, you are the CEO and founder of VNTANA. Tell us more.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm the co-founder and CEO of VNTANA. We make it easy and fast to create 3D web and AR experiences, whether that's for B2C or B2B companies, to help accelerate kind of the 3D visual digital transformation. I've been working in the 3D AR VR space for over a decade. So the silver lining of COVID is more people are willing to try this type of technology, and kind of very excited about this kind of watershed moment we're having now.
Excellent, Ashley. And thanks for pointing out the positives. It's great to know that we keep optimistic. So next up, Bill Schulze. Bill is Vice President of Business Development for JLL Technologies. So go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Frank. And very happy to join Ashley and Bill as well in this. And thanks to Moss Adams for the invitation. JLL's one of the world's largest commercial real estate services company, global company, about $18 billion in revenue last year, about 90,000 employees located worldwide. And we do everything in commercial real estate, from brokering buildings to actually running the buildings themselves. So I hope to bring a lot of insight into what we're seeing. Certainly the pandemic, if you look at any sub-industry segment and the impact of the pandemic, commercial real estate's in the crosshairs of the impact of this, of both the virus and the disease. My role at JLL is I run a group in our technologies division. We have 5 divisions, technologies being the newest one for JLL. We have a corporate venture fund called the Spark Fund. And we've placed made investments in about 25 prop tech startups over the last year and a half. And we have a growth team. It's basically a team of business development professionals that represent the invested companies both inside of JLL and externally. And I have the pleasure of guiding that team of BD professionals. So hopefully I'll be able to bring a point of view from sort of startups as these technology companies are looking at the landscape, but also take a view from a big corporation that has its hands in most of the major metropolitan cities in the world.
Great, thanks. So hopefully all of the attendees today will see we're coming from varied angles, and hopefully that will cover most of your thoughts. But looks like we've already got a question. So thank you for participating in the chat. Everybody keep going. So to sort of level set what we're talking about today, the digital transformation amidst COVID and how are you dealing with your customers and that kind of thing. And I guess one of the presentations that I attended got me thinking a bit, because when we talk about economy and changes in the economy, we talk about sometimes if there's a dip, okay, is it going to be a sharp V curve? Is it going to be a U curve? And I like the analogy somebody brought up that said it's a K curve. And I said, that visually helped me understand that. And so if you think of the two legs of the K, one's going up and one's going down. And so it's very divergent. And I think that's a good representation. When we took a look at a study that was done by the National Center for Middle Market Companies, what was striking was that, and not surprising, more than half of the companies, about 57%, had experienced a downturn in revenue, through the middle of the year. Okay. However, almost a quarter of the companies actually experienced an uptick in revenue. So that's where we're talking about this K curve. And so what I want to get to is just trying to understand where the companies are trying to find a way back. And if you look further in the study, what you find is, while there's most of the dollars spent have sort of been curtailed, in fact, in the digital spend of how to get to the customer, that's actually one of the higher spend areas where people are continuing to spend at or at higher than they were sort of based on the plan. And so it's not really intuitive. So I guess I'm going to ask to dovetail from this, what are the surprises that we're seeing? And maybe as we talk about the digital part, Ashley, maybe you can go first. What has been the surprises? I know you've mentioned some silver linings. Let's talk about both the positives and the challenges.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've definitely seen, we work with enterprise businesses. So typically they are a little more slow moving, a little wary of new technology, but as you said, digital is the only way to reach people right now. If you are a retailer, you've moved all of your spend into digital advertising and your digital e-com channels. Everyone became a D2C company overnight. And so what's surprising, it's been great to see people willing to test out 3D, augmented reality, do smaller tests to start. And then companies, clients like Adidas and others have seen drastic increases, like double conversion online rates. And so that's led them to expanding much quicker and faster than they traditionally would. So I think really the surprising and great thing is people being more willing to experiment, because kind of COVID threw all the rules out the window.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. So talking about the digital, one of the things I at Moss Adams, in my day job, I'm responsible for our retail practice, which includes bricks and mortar, omni-channel, direct-to-consumer, digital, all of that. And so, obviously the numbers have come out recently regarding the Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the stats are up something like 15% from I think 9 billion to 10.8 billion, something like that, over this weekend versus 2019. However, the store traffic is down dramatically. So maybe Bill, you can talk a little bit about what challenges and opportunities, Bill Schulze, about from the commercial real estate, how that's impacting.
Well, I think what's interesting is, first of all, hindsight's better than 2020, right? To play on the cliche. I think what's interesting from our point of view, it's amazing how predictable behaviors are, given the impact sort of of disease and virus and contagions. And you think about how many movies have been, how many plots have been written, and how many books have been written, and yet here we are experiencing it in real life, and behaviors seem to be predictable. Commercial real estate, like, our revenues are off for JLL this year. I put that almost in the classic no duh category when you think about it. For all the obvious reasons, people are not going into the workplace or into the office as you would expect. So the underlying business lines that support commercial real estate services are off because you don't have people in buildings. But when you take a look at the technology side of it, you look at companies that have built and have already brought to market technologies that are that support digital transformation. Certainly, work from home is something I think we'll probably get into as a primary topic of this conversation. But to me, I would almost embody work from home and this nature of a hybrid work environment as quintessential to the essence of digital transformation. And it's not just regional. We're talking about a global phenomenon because of the impact of the virus. So I support the K-curve view on this, but I almost support it with a well, of course, because look at the impact and the demands that it's placed on society, and then I think everything else just flows out of that.
Yeah, thanks. So Bill Rusitzky, continuing on with sort of this K-curve, which is a challenge for you. You're working with multiple companies, and some are on the upside and some are on the downside. So what are some of the surprises that you've seen and that you
right? I think one of the big surprises is seeing companies that are sort of really embracing the transformation. Certainly the speed of the transformation was unbelievable, right? Like, if you had said to people, "Oh, we're going to like suddenly move to work from home in literally a day or two," no one ever would have said that was anything other than a science fiction book, right? And then in literally the course of a week, we went virtually across the US and went to work from home. And so the transformation of the work from home from your coworkers, I think, has been fairly dramatic. But what's been even more dramatic is the whole notion of working with customers and moving that in online all the time. So whether it's, hey, I need to think about how to display my goods in 3D in a more effective way, how to have my employees communicate more effectively, the companies that have been able to do better than their average, right? Like, obviously, if you're a brick and mortar store and you're like, okay, I got to figure out something else. There was a great article in the New York Times this week about Shopify and how companies went and said, okay, I'm going to go stand up an e-commerce store because I have to, and how they were able to quickly do that and turn it into real revenue, where it was something they might have said, oh, we're going to think about this for a while. And I think, if anything, we've been working with our clients to say, okay, how do you execute faster? How do you think about an idea and then get it sort of the minimum viable product up and running as quickly as possible? Because to some extent you have to, right?
Yeah, and you know what, I think that's interesting from a standpoint of have to, right? There's a lot of things we talk about that we want to get to, and we're trying to plan things out in a strategic nature, but when it becomes an immediate you have to, then amazingly how we're agile and make things happen. So let's talk about what do we think is here for the long term out of this, the things that we've learned. What is going to be some of the long lasting changes that you see? And Ashley, I'll go to you.
Sure. I mean, I looked at a study recently by Artillery Intelligence, and it said 30% of consumers would never go into a clothing retail store again if the digital experience would allow them to order the proper size the first time. And so what I think that speaks to is people are been forced to get comfortable buying online a number of products. And so I don't think that's going to change. I think what is going to change is just what they want within a retail store. You know, retail is not going to go away. People still sometimes want to go in, touch, feel a product. But where that actual purchase happens, I think people are getting comfortable with online, and that's going to stay there. And it's not just, you know, with the B2C, you know, we're working with some medical device companies. You know, you can no longer send a sales rep into a hospital to show them some medical devices, but you could send them a link. They could hold up their phone, see a 3D version. Does that fit in the operating table? And that's actually leading to sales. So are they going to go back to spending all that money with, you know, travel and sending sales reps places? You know, I don't think so. At least not for the majority. So I think this is going to be a drastic change and reduced travel and more digital visualization.
Yeah, I guess I would argue with that a little bit. I think the bar is going to raise, but I do think people will go back to, you know, like if you look at trade shows and those kinds of events and other kinds of sales opportunities, I think people want to be able to like see people and touch people, but I do think that the bar for when you go do that is going to be dramatically changed.
Right. Yeah. When does that budget, the bar for that budget spend starts to be different?
Right.
Yeah, so I you know, it's interesting, Bill, you bring up the trade show things because, you know, I think February was the last trade show I was at, and it's odd for me. You know, I have my cycle, and I know, okay, this month I'm going here and there, and you know, you just learn to adapt, and it will be interesting to see when things open back up, what the movement's going to be. Some of the clients that we work with, you know, they always do the cost benefit analysis of going to the trade show. And it's like, you know, maybe we get some connections that we wouldn't have had. I think over the years that's reduced, but the interpersonal connection is always a positive. Yet, you know, most of us have been nearly a year now. This is how we communicate, this virtually. So maybe we're getting more comfortable. I don't know. I think it is going to be interesting to see. One of the things is Ashley was mentioning about the retail, and Bill, I'd love to hear from a real estate standpoint what the thoughts are. So we look at the malls in the country, right? We've been seeing a shift to more mixed use. Does this accelerate that? Do you think there'll be changes there, or maybe not? And you don't have to confine just to retail, but I'd love to hear about that as well.
How about if I don't answer the question and build off the last one? Because there are a couple of, so I think Ashley, she's made a very good point, I think, on this bridge of embracing digital transformation, to me, as a means of improving efficiency. And I think the thing that a surprise that's come out of this has been productivity. I think if you had polled everyone prior to and just said, imagine if there was a global pandemic and everybody had to work from home, what would the productivity level be worldwide, or even measured in a corporation? And I think the prevailing sentiment would have been it would be horrible. Like, you know, corporate productivity, business productivity is going to fall through the floor, and it's going to be a state of disarray and massive, complete worldwide depression, so on and so forth. And that didn't happen. Ignoring the psychological and emotional impacts of being locked in our homes, the fact is, on a pure measurement of business productivity, for those businesses that can support work from home, it's been a boom. And I think the second thing from this, which goes to the trade show question, the expense savings worldwide at a corporate level of people being in their homes, not commuting, not going into the office, not going to trade shows, not doing all of the standard interpersonal interactions has had a dramatic beneficial effect to the bottom line through expense savings. And I'm just, I think as we emerge from this, that we are staring at a hybrid, first of all, a fundamental change in how we live our lives as workers and as humans, both in the workplace, but we're also going to see this run its rake through how we interact with each other on business. I think we'll see, maybe there'll be a blip because people just want to go back and meet everybody, but I think that we'll see a downtrend on in-person interactions, and I would think we'll see a fairly significant uptrend in virtualized experiences that take the place of what we thought was the normal before. And I think VR and 3D technologies will be front and center to supporting this new hybrid reality.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the changes that we haven't yet seen is sort of the virtual meetings 2.0, right? Like, we're now all in little squares. I don't know how many of you have been to a virtual trade show, but that experience needs to be completely rethought if it's going to actually be useful, because the value of those is in networking and the ability to do that. And I anticipate that in the next couple of months, you'll start to see that. And people should be looking for those new experiences and how to adopt them to how they interact with customers and how they sort of form communities around their products, because I think that that's going to be a fundamental change that we'll see certainly by the middle part of next year. No matter what happens with vaccine rollouts and those kinds of things, I think people will fundamentally say, I'm just not getting on a plane and going to Vegas for an entire week. I'll go for a couple of days or something.
Yeah, I have a friend in his company, he just purchased a $300 Oculus headset, mailed it to a client, said, put this on, and I'm going to walk you through this virtual experience, which at the end of the day, $300 versus a plane flight and hotels, the VR, you're still just a character. You don't look like yourself. So it's not quite there with the true conference meeting. But I thought that was, when you look at the cost benefit analysis, a pretty innovative thing to do.
Yeah, and possibly a year ago, that customer would have never opened that box, right? Because what we've learned now is sort of this is I think you said, Bill, 2.0. This is 1.0, and that's 2.0. It's hard to go from 0 to 2.0. So this transition that's occurring, as I was listening to you speak, I'm thinking, the panelists that we didn't put on here was the 18-year-old gamer. Right? Could you imagine that they could probably enlighten us in the virtual world and inserting themselves, and I think we maybe could all learn a little bit from that community. So interesting, good comments. We do have some polling questions today. I was going to kick off the first one, which is Deanna. I don't know if you post that up so that everybody can see. Perfect. So there you go. So have you, we've been talking a little bit about what we've seen. How have you seen your customers' expectations change? So if you could get into that chat room and click on it. I think we give you a minute to fill in your items, and we'll see. Anybody want to make predictions? We can't probably do that if we've influenced the results.
Influence the
all right.
There was also a question that Ashley, I don't know if you want to answer, that popped up in the chat about AR.
Yeah, as you guys are answering this, so augmented reality at a trade show, even when in-person trade shows come back, you can think about heavy equipment that is just extremely expensive to ship and set up at a conference, or an item that just has so many different product configurations that you couldn't possibly showcase everything. You could use augmented reality to have that digital version, whether that's a mobile augmented reality or headset. Mobile's probably the easiest, but it allows you to display an infinite amount of product without having to ship anything there and letting it be truly customizable. And that artillery intelligence, that same study said that, I think it was about 60% of people said they would pay more for a product that they could configure in 3D because they could actually visualize everything. So.
And to that end, so we have the results of our polling question, which is this one might have been a softball. I could have made money in Vegas possibly, but I don't go there anymore because I used to go there for trade shows. But in any event, yeah, it's not surprising that the customers are expecting more out of the digital communication, and I think that echoes the stat I kicked off with, where even though maybe dollars of revenue are down, people are spending. And not to take away what you said, Bill, also, I do believe, as we go back one more to the analogy of the K curve, and we think of, the ones that are going down in terms of revenue, I think of the other part of the K right next to it, which is the expenses that you talked about that are going down even at a sharper rate, right? So there are some of the companies that are sort of existing at a different level as far as spend, and financially are coming out of here a little bit more profitable than they ever thought they could at a reduced sales number. So interesting. What about the rest of the panelists? Any surprises with the results, or want to comment about some? There's a decent number of people that haven't seen a change in expectation.
Yeah, I guess 80% is a little bit higher than I actually would have expected it, but it's not shocking to me.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so let's go on and let's talk a little bit about employees. Okay, it's the internal focus for a minute within our organizations. Whoever wants to go first, I think all of us have good input here. I don't know, Bill Schulze, why don't you talk a little bit about where you're at, what you're seeing? You're dealing globally in your organization, so it'd be interesting to hear if it's similar across the planet or if there are pockets where it's dramatically different.
It's well, we're all human beings, so we can start from that basis. There are differences regionally as far as the degree to which there's lockdowns or access to workplaces. Right now, Europe was doing pretty well while over the summer in particular, while we were in our sort of second wave. So there were a lot of folks back at work in buildings, much more of a feeling of close to normalcy. Asia Pacific also has, I think, been in a better position as far as what you would describe as a normalcy of work or interaction with work. And the States, by and large, we've had a number of our buildings open and available. I would say but at the same time, as a company, we've not made any demands on workers to go back to work. It's first of all, it's state, local, it's whatever the jurisdictions require. And then this is unprecedented. I know that's probably the number one word used in describing this. We are open to, we want people to feel safe and to feel comfortable in their own decisions, and that's usually what governs it. I will say, of the team that I mentioned that I manage, I have not met any of them in person. So my entire work relationship with a group of 10 people has been entirely virtual. The amazing thing is I feel like I've developed a great rapport, and we have a great team enthusiasm, and that was able to be done remotely. So there's something to be said there.
And that's amazing. That you haven't met anybody like physically, but you have that connection. Ashley, what's your experience?
Yeah, we've actually hired 3 people since COVID, and yeah, I've never met them in person, which I agree is pretty crazy. But I think that the two things that have been hard that we really had to make an effort on is replicating that coffee conversation. When you bump into someone in the hallway and chat, and so we've been trying like team trivia for 30 minutes, just trying to get people to interact more authentically. And one of our employees said, because we use Slack to communicate, like I try and say hi to people before I ask them for something, like trying to even just who I am, being like, how's your day going? Well, just trying to recreate that same, type of conversation, I think is really important. And I know I've had to make a big effort to try and do that.
And Bill, what about you?
Yeah, I think, we haven't quite figured that out. To me, there's, going back to are there going to be bigger changes around that? Ashley reminded me when she mentioned Slack, like yesterday, Salesforce announced that we were buying Slack for nearly $30 billion. And I think, if you think about how those tools are going to come up, where it really does create that ability to kind of casually interact with people, that we still haven't really seen that in a way that's sort of scalable and comfortable, but I think people are still trying to figure that out. And I think companies that are flexible enough to kind of react to that, I find it continues to be funny to me that you'll be in meetings and somebody's cat will walk by the screen, or their kids, and they'll be like, oh, I'm really, really sorry. And I'm like, aren't we done with that at this point? We've been at this for a while. You should just be like, hey, it's kind of the way it is. So I think until we sort of get over that, we won't all be in that state where it's the new normal.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of, for example, just personal information that 10 years ago we would guard, and we get very comfortable with the plethora of information on all of us that's out there on the internet that's easily accessible, and somehow we've made that shift, and now we're all looking at each other's houses, right? Before this, that wasn't the case. So it's like, well, now I have to allow people into my home. All right, where am I going to sit? One of my partners who has small children and can't find a way to keep them from interrupting daddy during the day other than going and working in his garage. So, he's in his garage with the bikes hanging down, and he's helping clients through a complex, M&A transaction. It's a little comical, but it does work. And so I can tell you in our world, maybe in some respects it's better to be lucky than good. What I mean by that is I grew up in an era where we're doing all of our work on this thing here called paper, and in the auditor's world, we call them work papers. Well, I don't know what it was, 15 years ago, we transformed everything to electronic, which allows us to access files that are encrypted, so they're secure, but from all over the world, wherever we're at. And so it was a pain to go through, and frankly, at the time we did it, we didn't have to do it. So it probably took longer, and some of us holding back, going, do we really have to do this? But we got there. Now I look at it and just it's sort of status quo with how our operations are happening. So Ashley, when you talk about the happy hours and the trivia and things like that, that's something that we're trying to make more of a conscious effort to do. And first it felt a little odd. It's like we're scheduling some, playtime, if you will, right? But the reality is no different than when you're, saying, hey, if you got a friend, let's go hang out on Friday night. It feels a little bit more formal, but effectively you get to that comfort level. So I don't know. It's been an interesting transition. Go ahead.
I was going to say one of the other transitions that I've seen this accelerate, and I think that companies that have kind of embraced it have been able to move more quickly, is, there were still people who were sending attachments and saying, comment on this document, and then you have multiple versions of the document kind of circulating around versus putting it in the cloud, whether it's Office 365 or Google Docs, and letting everybody kind of comment at once. And I think that the companies that really lean forward into that collaboration are able to execute at a much, much faster rate. And that's one of the things that I think this is really accelerated, because you can't like sit in a room and kind of sit and kind of work on the documents together. You have to put them in the cloud. You have to do that. And I think for companies that haven't really embraced that as the absolute standard way to work, they should be rethinking that. And I think, you know, if you internally get emails and people have actual real attachments and say, comment on this and send it back to me, I think you need to rethink how that workflow is inside of your company.
I definitely agree, because that's when you end up with 5 versions and you don't know which version is the real version. And that's something, you know, what really spurred us to build our platform was that for 3D. So, you know, it's on the cloud and anyone can comment, right? Because you'd end up with 20 different versions and no one knew which one was supposed to go on the e-commerce site, you know? Exactly.
And one of the exciting things that you can do on the VNTANA platform is actually, like, in the 3D model, put a pin in it and make a comment on a specific part. And so everybody can spin it around and still see what that comment is and where it's attached to. And I think, you know, whether that's 2D text documents or images or stuff, we'll continue to see those kinds of things. And I encourage people to really embrace those sorts of solutions, because it really does speed up productivity dramatically.
Those are great comments. Obviously, we're trying to deliver value here, and I've seen both sides of that scenario, and the chase and the email versus this is where we're all working together. Bill Schulze, tell me, with respect to sort of the technology, if I'm thinking about, I have a warehouse with 300 employees coming in, right? And or, you know, I took my grandkids to school the other day, and you used to walk them to school and they just go in, right? And now there's this big line. So now I'm thinking, okay, instead of 25 kindergartners, there's 250 employees trying to get through. And are the things that you're seeing in the companies in your world of commercial real estate that have found some ways of expediting just the process?
Yeah, actually, it's one of the most active subsegments in the industry right now. The loose term is tenant experience, and there are sort of sub-functional areas under tenant experience, like visitor management or entrance management. So there are a number of startups. There are also some fairly well-established companies that are aggressively building and innovating into this space. Spark, JLL through its Spark Fund has a placement in a company called HQO, which is, you know, it's basically the way to expedite is your phone. So what and I think this is something you will see pretty broadly enabled as we get back into work. Your entrance and access to the building is going to be preset. You'll have an app that you will interact with that will basically alert the building to let you know that you're coming in. And if you follow the tenant experience from, I'm getting ready to commute into a building, I want to let the building know that I'm coming, and I want the building and my office to communicate to me relative density of people that are there. Maybe if it's a very large building with multiple entrances, you can the app can direct people to less crowded entrances. This can be tied to control of the elevators. So elevator mechanisms are actually also now dynamically controlled, and with the overarching goal of this being as contactless as possible. Like, you're not pushing buttons, you're not opening doors, you're actually dealing with a very sophisticated building operation, which is now being tailor-made for the tenant, leading all the way to, if you're in an open work environment, where is a desk that has had maybe has not had anyone sitting at it for 90 minutes. There's sensors that we'll find in offices now, and all of this will be coordinated with big data backends and then apps that will communicate with the tenant and allow a more efficient access to the work environment. And this is happening and will happen.
That's incredible. I can tell you, in our world, we've been using hoteling software for quite some time because we're very mobile, but when we go back to the office, and so the office might house a quarter of our local workforce, right? But you go, but that's another generation, and obviously it's incredible. It can make it more efficient and safety enhanced. That's amazing. So somebody's going to ask you how do we download those apps? You know you're going to get pinged quite a bit on that.
Yeah, it's okay. The building. I mean, again, as building management, these are. One call out I'll make is JLL. If they're probably publicly facing, the thing we're most well known for in the business environment is our research. We have a tremendous number of people, and we make a tremendous investment in environmental surveys and research across the wide chasm of commercial real estate. And so we've been surveying and crunching and analyzing really the impact of COVID since prior to the lockdown. I mean, the initial first set of research that I've seen dates back to December of last year, when the coronavirus was first detected in Wuhan, and we have large facilities in China. The thing that I find interesting is surveys of sort of independent random surveys of people, and the questions are around how do you feel about coming back to work, and all of those sort of general atmospheric questions. Tenants expect the building operations to deliver them, and expect their employers to deliver them a safe workplace. I mean, that's now the new contract and expectation that exists between tenants and occupiers, and I think that's a good place to start from. And at least from what we're seeing, technologically there's this huge uprising to meet that demand, to meet that expectation. And then I'm back to like what I first said, which there's a lot that's sort of self-evident of what we're seeing. Of course, technology is going to step in and attempt to solve the problems that we're experiencing, because that's what technology has done throughout the history of humankind. So it's great to see these types of investments manifest themselves in a way that I think we'll all see directly as we get back into it.
And I think more expeditiously, given the environment, than otherwise would have happened. So it's incredible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forcing.
So great input. Maybe let's get some input from our participants now. Deanna, if we could go to our next polling question. We can post it up there. So here you go. So let's talk about employees coming back to the workplace. What are your expectations? And again, got a minute, right? Everybody running back when, quote, COVID is over, which that's an interesting definition you'd have to come up with as well. Or is it the other way? Hey, I kind of found a way to work effectively digitally. We've transformed and I don't need to go, or some kind of combination, or who knows? We're going through this analysis, trying to figure out, the space. I mean, in probably one of our greatest decisions with the worst timing was to go away from these old school offices, right? And having our facility, office all separated, and we're going to all be together in kumbaya, and more people can fit, and it's easier to interact. And now we got to go. I'm going to need your app, Bill, to be able to tell us who's sat where in the last 90 minutes, and back away. So let's see. So
It's a good thing.
Will be a mix. Okay.
Everybody has an opinion though, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no not sure. So interesting. So not going back is in the minority, right? We're not going back to the way it was.
Well, one thing it allowed us to do, I mean, all of our recent hires were remote, one Ohio, one Texas, and if you really think about it, if you were trying to get the absolute best talent for a job that's also driving distance to one office, you're really limiting yourself. So for me, it kind of opened up just the talent pool and your ability to get amazing people without that centralized office.
We've seen that with a lot of clients who previously would have been geographically constrained, who are like, well, let's not worry about that right now and see who we find is the best person. And I think that has been a pretty dramatic shift that I suspect will continue.
Interesting impact in our world is we are primarily a West Coast firm. There's 3,500 of us, and most of us are in the far left or the next set of states over. But we have clients all over the world and all over the U.S. And in the past, up until this year, there's always the discussion about, okay, well, what about, where's your office? Is your office down the street? And it's funny because I usually answer that with, do you really care? Because last place people want to go to is an accounting firm, advisory firm office. They want us to be there, and we always are. So that question is almost completely off the table anymore, because we're having these conversations, and it's about, are we delivering what you need? Is it timely? You have access to us. So it's kind of interesting. But one study that I saw, and it was released this week, talks about, what if there were a vaccine? Who would take the vaccine? What percentage of the population would take the vaccine? And I had some stats. Let me see if I can find them real quick. But basically, it was a V curve that said something like 60% in June. 60% of people said, adults in America, yes, I would take the vaccine. And then you went to September, and it dropped down to right at about 50%. Okay. And then just recently, they released the same group looking at 10,000 people across the U.S. adults. Now it's up to about 58%. Yes, I would take the vaccine. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not sure what to think about it. I'm trying to kind of project in how that relates to rolling into, will people come back to work, right? And then I said, well, let me go check out just the flu vaccination shot, right? Been around for a long time. 48% of Americans take that. So I guess people are more inclined to take the coronavirus COVID-19 vaccine now than at least have taken the flu shot. So I don't know. I mean, at one point I was going to ask everybody, then we were getting into too much of a political thing, but I was just trying to get the information that's out there and to sort of project, how do we think that is going to impact the going back to work? So yeah. Somebody else. Okay, so let's move on and jump in a little bit more into the virtual reality, the augmented reality, and talk a little bit about how that's impacting the world. So Ashley, maybe you can kick us off with how's this employing, quickly into the strategy of companies? What are they doing? What are you seeing? Maybe best practices.
Yeah, I would say, to start with, whether you're wanting to do augmented reality, virtual reality, you need a 3D version of your product or whatever you're wanting to look at there. And 3D can now be supported on the web. So you can just start with 3D on a web page, which is like a great first step. As we talked about, it's hard to go from 0 to 3. So that's kind of a great first step. And then once you have that 3D at scale across your organization, you can start to use it in a lot of different places. So a lot of people think 3D and augmented reality, it's, this consumer facing experience. We're actually seeing most enterprises start with internal decision making and B2B buying. So, Li and Feng, they were forced to do some samples, just pure 3D version digital, and not physically prototype or physically make or ship samples because of all the logistic nightmare happening, in China. And it worked. And their B2B buyers were able to make decisions based on those 3D digitizations. Their internal team could make changes and agree on it. And so moving forward, that's a huge cost saving and reduction in carbon footprint if you think about not having to physically make prototypes and samples. And so just beginning with kind of those internal decision-making processes is, I think, a great first step, because everyone's afraid to give something to their customer that, isn't going to work great. So, using it across that retail value chain, starting with that B2B buying, internal decision-making, and then last, going to that consumer facing, app or website has been a really great way for companies to start.
That's incredible. As you're talking about that, and I'm thinking about, my head always goes to cash flow and timing and that. And so in addition to maybe being more cost effective, just the timing of that, to try and ship samples back and forth, you cut out so much. And to the extent that when product is sourced offshore, oftentimes it's sourced offshore, obviously at a cost savings, okay, in dollar terms, but it is a time drain. And when you think of retail and want to react to those consumers, you want to be as close to it as possible. So back and forth in the virtual reality world, which I imagine can also be easily shared on the consumer side. If the B2B connections there, it's like, okay, well, let me put this out now to my followers and let them do their own polls, and then we can produce based on that, which you can't do with a physical sample, right?
Exactly. The CEO of Levi Strauss actually last year said, customers with the advent of 3D printing, customers are going to want to be able to design their product and choose their features on the website, and then it's made to order eventually. So as you said, it helps increase speed to market. If you start with that one 3D file, again, it could just be on a web page, doesn't have to be in AR or VR, but starting with that from design all the way to the consumer and back to the manufacturer is really what can help lower costs, increase speed to market, and at the end of the day, increase sales, because you're giving your consumers what they really want, because they could help vote on it almost.
Excellent.
I have a great example of almost the opposite application of this on big scale and at infrastructure. One of our Spark Fund invested companies is called OpenSpace, and they've built a cloud-based construction management system that basically outfits the general contracting layer for large building projects with VR cameras on their hard hats. And they walk through, basically they do their normal walkthroughs as any GC would do on large construction. And the OpenSpace backend system is chronicling their walkthroughs, but mapping that to the blueprints that have been generated by the architects, and then creating an entire communication layer on top of that that allows every major stakeholder, from the architect to the building investor, owner to the occupier, through the entire stage of development from breaking ground to final finishes. And then you end up with a body of work that even after the fact, this is a great one where they were able to use archive 3D walkthrough footage on a build out that was able to allow them to detect a mistake made in the construction of a stairwell without having to tear apart the finished product of the stairwell, because they had this completely mapped chronologically. And I think that's a great example of the power of augmented reality or virtualized 3D in a cataloging and archive sense. Nobody had to go to the building the architect didn't have to fly to the city to go look at the building. So it's here to stay.
Okay. Bill, thoughts of what you're seeing across your client base?
No, I just reiterate around Bill's last example. I think, what we're seeing is clients who are aggressive at looking at new technologies like that, being able to execute faster. And so I think that being able to have somebody either at your firm or an advisor that you have that kind of helps you focus on how am I going to transform the business? How am I going to take advantage of new technologies is critically important in today's environment.
Excellent. Okay, so we're coming up on the end of the hour, so I'm just going to throw out one last question I'd like each of you to address as you look into the crystal ball, maybe the fuzzy crystal ball for 2021. Oh, sorry, I skipped our polling question. Let's do that. Everybody, you see it. Thank you, Deanna, for making sure I didn't miss that. Let's get some info on where our attendees are with respect to using these technologies. And as they're working on that, just the question that I'm going to give to the panelists is as you look at this crystal ball, what's your 2021 prediction? And remember, we're recording. We're going to go back and visit, but just from a standpoint of what do you think? Are we going to be more people on the top end of the K curve, the bottom end of the K curve? Whatever your read is, that would be helpful as people move forward.
I guess I'll say I think it'll be a tale of two cities, right? There'll be companies that have really been able to take advantage of these changes, and other ones that are really continue to be challenged by it. Some of which will be, endemic to the environment, and their whole industry has been affected dramatically. But even so, it's how you can do better than the norm, I guess, is going to be the key thing to taking advantage of what's happening today.
Hey, Bill, thank you for that. And Ashley, before you go, I just want to tell you, you are going to have a great 2021, because if we look at the survey results, 57% have done none of those things. So VNTANA is the name of Ashley's company. Everybody reach out to Ashley. She can help you. But go ahead, talk to us about what you see for 2021.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies are just really going to reevaluate their product mix or, services mix. Whether you were an event company and had to pivot to figure out online events, I think you're going to keep making sure you have that online optionality, right? I think people are going to be more cognizant of what happens if this happens again, and trying to come up and make sure they have business lines and revenue streams that are diversified.
Excellent. Bill?
And so ignoring a lot of what we've just talked about, for us, the survey information is pretty direct. People, there's a lot to like for working from home. Maybe not 24/7, 365, but our relationship with cities, our relationship with our work environments has changed fundamentally because of COVID. But even after that's gone, and even if it didn't exist, most workers now will want at least 1 or 2 days working out of their house for that flexibility and the benefits it provides. The balance will be a mix of in office traditionally, mixed also with what we believe are sort of satellite hubs, flexible workspaces where people that work for the same company get together at a intermediate facility that's not the big office in the big city, but it's not in their home. But things have changed. We've entered into a new hybrid world, and I think it'll have a fundamental change on the way we viewed society historically.
Excellent. And just my closing remarks, first of all, to the panelists, thank you. You've been spectacular. I'm very happy that our attendees have got great input, and I believe we'll find out that they enjoyed it, and we'll sign up for number 5 and number 6 in the series. From my own perspective, in addition to what you've mentioned, which I'm completely on board with, I am pretty optimistic actually about 2021. I feel like we are going to get to a point where there's a vaccine. I feel like there's people that are going to be comfortable moving in that direction. And there's a lot of pent up demand, whether you didn't take your vacation this year or you didn't do whatever you wanted to do. There might be a sort of a doubling up impact in 2021. So keep your fingers crossed again. Thank you, everybody, panelists for joining, and attendees. Hopefully you'll come back for our next session.
Thanks a lot, Frank.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.